Marcus Chun had built a billion-dollar empire on a lie, but when two 9-year-old girls walked into his boardroom and pointed at his hands, every carefully constructed wall came crashing down. The crescent-shaped scar between his thumb and forefinger, the same mark mirrored on their small hands, was about to expose a secret that would either destroy everything he'd created or give him back the family he'd abandoned 8 years ago. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The presentation was supposed to be routine. Marcus Chun had delivered hundreds of them over his 15-year career, each one a carefully orchestrated performance of confidence and corporate precision. He stood at the head of the gleaming mahogany table in the executive boardroom of Chun Technologies, his navy blue suit pressed to perfection, his silver cufflinks catching the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows. 23 board members sat around him, their faces reflecting varying degrees of attention and boredom as he clicked through slides detailing the company's expansion into educational technology. This was his kingdom. He had built Chun Technologies from nothing, transforming a small software startup into a billion-dollar empire that now employed over 5,000 people across 3 continents. At 42, Marcus was the youngest self-made billionaire in the tech industry, featured on magazine covers and invited to speak at conferences around the world. His life was a testament to the American dream, a carefully curated story of determination and brilliance. What the world didn't know, what nobody in this room could ever suspect, was that Marcus Chun was a ghost. The man who stood before them had died 8 years ago, at least on paper, in a deliberate and meticulously planned erasure of his former self. The presentation continued smoothly. Marcus gestured toward the screen where colorful graphs illustrated projected growth in the education sector. His voice was steady and authoritative as he outlined the company's new initiative to provide affordable learning tablets to underprivileged schools. It was a philanthropic venture that would also serve as brilliant marketing, a win-win that had the board members nodding in approval. He was just about to transition to the financial projections when his assistant, Jennifer, slipped quietly into the boardroom. Her face was pale, and she carried a strange expression that Marcus couldn't quite read. She approached him with hesitant steps and whispered something that made his blood run cold. "There are 2 young girls in the lobby," she said, her voice barely audible. "They insisted on coming up. Security tried to stop them, but they somehow got past reception. They're asking for you specifically, Mr. Chun. They say it's urgent and they won't leave until they speak." Marcus felt his carefully constructed composure begin to crack. Children didn't just wander into the executive offices of a Fortune 500 company. The building had multiple layers of security, keycard access, and a vigilant reception desk. The fact that 2 young girls had somehow breached all of that was alarming enough, but the timing was impossibly suspicious. He glanced at the board members, most of whom were now looking at him with curiosity, their attention drawn by the interruption. "I apologize for the disruption," Marcus said smoothly, his years of practice allowing him to maintain his professional demeanor even as his mind raced. "Please give me just a moment to handle this matter. I'll have security escort them out and we can continue." He followed Jennifer out of the boardroom, his heart pounding against his ribs with a force that threatened to break through his chest. As they walked down the pristine hallway with its modern art installations and polished marble floors, he tried to calculate the possibilities. It couldn't be them. It was impossible. He had been so careful, so thorough in severing every connection to his past life. 8 years ago, Michael Torres had ceased to exist, and Marcus Chun had risen from his ashes like a carefully planned phoenix. The elevator doors opened and he stepped into the expansive lobby of the 43rd floor. What he saw made the floor tilt beneath his feet. 2 girls stood near the reception desk, their small frames dwarfed by the towering glass walls and contemporary furniture. They couldn't have been more than 9 years old, and they were identical in every way. Same dark hair pulled back in neat ponytails, same determined expressions on their heart-shaped faces, same defiant posture as they stood with their arms crossed. They wore matching school uniforms, navy blue jumpers over white shirts, and their backpacks sat at their feet like small soldiers standing guard. But it was their eyes that stopped his heart. Those eyes were the exact shade of amber that he saw in the mirror every morning. A distinctive golden brown that seemed to catch and hold the light. Those were his eyes staring back at him from 2 small, fierce faces. The taller of the 2 girls, though only by perhaps an inch, stepped forward when she saw him, her chin lifted in a gesture of determination that was achingly familiar. "Are you Marcus Chun?" she asked, her voice clear and surprisingly steady for someone so young. He wanted to lie. Every instinct screamed at him to deny it, to have security remove them immediately, to preserve the careful wall he had built between his 2 lives. But something in those amber eyes held him captive, and he found himself nodding slowly. "I am," he said, his voice sounding strange and distant to his own ears. "Who are you, and how'd you get up here?" The second girl moved to stand beside her sister, and they exchanged a glance that spoke of shared secrets and unbreakable bond. Marcus felt a painful stab of recognition. He had known twins once, had held them as infants, had promised them a future that he had ultimately stolen from them. "My name is Emma," the first girl said. "This is my sister Lily. We need to talk to you about something very important." Marcus glanced at Jennifer, who stood nearby with her phone in hand, clearly ready to call security. He should have given the order. He should have had them removed immediately before they could say anything else, before they could shatter the illusion of his carefully constructed life, but he couldn't do it. Something in their presence, in the way they stood together with such determination, made it impossible for him to turn them away. "Not here," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Come with me." He led them to a small conference room off the main lobby, a space typically used for brief meetings with visitors. Jennifer started to follow, but he held up a hand. "Give us a moment, please. Close the door." She hesitated, clearly concerned, but nodded and pulled the door shut behind her. Marcus stood facing the two girls, his hands gripping the back of a leather chair to steady himself. "How did you find me?" he asked, though part of him already knew the answer. It would have been in the news, in the endless articles and profiles written about the mysterious Marcus Chun who had appeared in Silicon Valley 8 years ago with revolutionary software and seemingly unlimited capital. Emma reached into her backpack and pulled out a worn manila folder. She placed it on the conference table between them. "Mom kept everything," she said simply. "All the papers, all the documents. She never threw anything away, even when she probably should have. She told us that our father died when we were babies. She said he was a good man who made bad choices and that he loved us even though he had to leave." Marcus felt his knees go weak. He pulled out the chair he had been gripping and sat down heavily. The folder lay between them like a live grenade, and he couldn't bring himself to reach for it. Lily spoke for the first time, her voice softer than her sister's, but no less determined. "Mom died 3 months ago. She was sick for a long time, but she never told us how bad it was. She didn't want us to worry." Emma's hand found her sister's and they gripped each other tightly. "We've been in foster care since then," Emma continued. "They split us up at first, put us in different homes, but we kept running away until they agreed to keep us together. The system is trying to find us a permanent placement, but nobody wants to adopt 9-year-old twins with attitude problems." Marcus closed his eyes, the weight of their words crushing him. This was his nightmare made real, the past he had buried coming back with the faces of the daughters he had abandoned. When he opened his eyes again, both girls were watching him with expressions that were far too old, far too knowing for their age. "We did a lot of research," Lily said. "We used the computers at the library. Mom's papers had your old name, Michael Torres, and some information about where you worked before. We found articles about how Michael Torres died in a car accident 8 years ago, but there was never a body recovered. Then we found articles about Marcus Chun, who appeared around the same time with a tech company." She pulled out her phone, a battered device that had clearly seen better days, and scrolled through saved images. "We compared photos," Emma added. "The nose is different. You had surgery, didn't you? And you dyed your hair darker, but some things you can't change." Lily held up her phone, showing an image of Marcus from a recent tech conference. She zoomed in on his hands, which were gesturing as he spoke. "You have a scar," she said quietly, her finger tracing the image on the screen. "Right there, between your thumb and index finger on your right hand, shaped like a crescent moon. Mom told us our dad had the same scar. He got it when he was a kid, climbing a fence." Marcus looked down at his own hands, at the familiar scar that he had carried for 35 years. It was small, barely noticeable unless someone knew to look for it, but it was there. A permanent mark that connected him to a past he had tried so desperately to escape. Before he could respond, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Jennifer, brief and urgent. "The board is asking if everything is okay. They want to continue the presentation." He stood up, his mind spinning with impossible choices. If he acknowledged who he really was, everything would unravel. His company, his reputation, his carefully crafted identity would all collapse. But if he denied it, if he turned these two girls away, he would be abandoning them a second time. The door to the conference room suddenly opened. Jennifer stood there, her expression apologetic but firm. "Mr. Chun, I'm sorry, but the board is getting restless. They're asking you to return to finish the presentation." Marcus looked at the two girls, at Emma's defiant expression and Lily's hopeful eyes. Then he made a decision that would change everything. He picked up the manila folder from the table. "Tell the board I'll be right there," he said to Jennifer, "and ask them to set up the video conferencing system. I have something important to add to today's presentation." The walk back to the boardroom felt like a death march. Marcus moved through the hallway with Emma and Lily following close behind him, their small footsteps echoing against the marble floors. Jennifer trailed at a distance, her confusion evident in the worried glances she kept shooting his way. He could feel the weight of every decision he had ever made pressing down on his shoulders, threatening to crush him beneath the accumulated burden of 8 years of lies. When they reached the boardroom doors, Marcus paused with his hand on the brass handle. He looked down at the two girls who stood beside him, their matching expressions of nervous determination making his chest ache with a pain he thought he had buried long ago. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he asked quietly, though he wasn't certain if he was asking them or himself. Emma met his gaze steadily. "We've been sure since we found you," she said simply. "The question is whether you're ready to stop running." Her words hit him like a physical blow, their simple truth more devastating than any accusation could have been. He'd been running for 8 years, sprinting away from the wreckage of his old life with such desperate speed that he had never once looked back to see what he was leaving behind. He pushed open the doors and walked into the boardroom with the 2 girls at his side. The effect was immediate and electric. 23 pairs of eyes swung toward them, the conversation dying mid-sentence as the board members registered the unexpected presence of 2 children in their exclusive domain. Marcus saw the expressions shift from confusion to shock to barely concealed irritation. This was their sanctuary, a place where multi-million-dollar decisions were made, where the future of thousands of employees was determined. Children had no place here, and their presence was a violation of every unspoken rule that governed this space. Richard Thornton, the chairman of the board, and a man who had been with the company since its earliest days, half rose from his seat at the far end of the table. "Marcus," he said, his tone carrying a warning that was barely veiled by professional courtesy, "what is the meaning of this? We're in the middle of a critical presentation." Marcus walked to his position at the head of the table, but instead of returning to his presentation, he gestured for Emma and Lily to stand beside him. The girls moved with surprising grace, their nervousness hidden beneath a layer of practiced composure that spoke of difficult lives lived with courage. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle over him like a heavy cloak. "Before we continue with the presentation," Marcus began, his voice remarkably steady given the chaos raging inside him, "I need to share something with all of you. Something that will fundamentally change your understanding of who I am and what this company represents." Quote, Margaret Foster, the CFO and one of his earliest investors, leaned forward with narrowed eyes. Her sharp business instincts had clearly detected that something significant was unfolding. "This sounds serious, Marcus. Perhaps we should discuss this in private," she suggested, her gaze flickering meaningfully toward the children. "No," he said firmly. "This concerns everyone in this room, and it needs to be said now in front of witnesses." He placed the manila folder that Emma had given him on the table, his fingers resting on its worn surface. "My name's not Marcus Chun," he said, the words falling into the silence like stones into still water. 8 years ago, I legally changed my identity and created an elaborate fiction about my past. The man you know, the biography you've read in countless articles, the story of the self-made immigrant who came to America with nothing but a dream. That person doesn't exist. The reaction was instantaneous. Several board members began speaking at once, their voices rising in a cacophony of disbelief and outrage. Richard Thornton was on his feet now, his face flushed with anger. "This is absurd," he thundered. "Marcus, if this is some kind of joke, it's in incredibly poor taste. If it's not a joke, then you've perpetrated a massive fraud against this board and every investor in this company." Marcus raised his hand, asking for silence. When the room finally quieted, he continued, "My real name is Michael Torres. 8 years ago, I was a software engineer working for a mid-sized tech company in Austin, Texas. I was married to a woman named Elena, and we had 2 daughters. He gestured to Emma and Lily, who stood beside him with their heads held high despite the overwhelming attention focused on them. "These are my daughters. I abandoned them when they were 18 months old, faked my death, and disappeared." The silence that followed was absolute and suffocating. Marcus could see the board members processing this information, their faces reflecting a range of emotions from shock to fury to something that looked almost like betrayal. David Park, one of the younger board members and a venture capitalist who had made his fortune in early-stage tech investments, spoke up. His voice was cold and analytical. "If what you're saying is true, and I'm not convinced it is, then you've built this entire company on a foundation of lies. Every contract we've signed, every partnership we've formed, every stock option granted has been based on fraudulent identity. Do you have any idea the legal implications of this?" Marcus nodded slowly. "I understand the gravity of what I'm telling you. I've known for 8 years that this day might come, and I've prepared for it. But I need you to understand why I did what I did and why I'm choosing to reveal the truth now." Emma's hand slipped into his, and he felt the warmth of her small fingers wrapping around his palm. The gesture was so trusting, so completely at odds with everything he deserved, that it nearly broke him. Lily spoke then, her soft voice somehow carrying clearly through the large room. "Our mom died 3 months ago," she said, and every head turned toward her. "She had cancer, but she never told us until the very end. She spent her last weeks making sure we knew that our father loved us, even though he left. She said he wasn't a bad man, just a scared one who made terrible choices." The raw honesty in her words seemed to puncture the anger in the room, replacing it with an uncomfortable mix of sympathy and confusion. Margaret Foster's expression had softened slightly, though her business acumen remained sharp. She looked at Marcus with searching eyes. "Why did you leave?" she asked quietly. "What could have possibly been bad enough to make you abandon your infant daughters and fake your own death?" Marcus felt the memories rushing back, overwhelming him with their intensity. It had been 8 years since he had allowed himself to truly remember that time, that desperate dark period when his entire world had been collapsing around him. "I was in debt," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Serious debt. I had made some investments that went catastrophically wrong. Borrowed money from people who don't accept excuses or payment plans. Lena and I were fighting constantly. She wanted me to declare bankruptcy, to ask her parents for help, to face the consequences of my mistakes. But I was too proud, too ashamed." He looked down at his daughters, seeing Elena's features reflected in their faces. I convinced myself that they would be better off without me, that Elena could move on, remarry someone stable and responsible, someone who could give our daughters the life they deserved. So you faked your death, Richard, Thornton said flatly. You let your wife believe you were gone, let your daughters grow up without a father, all because you were too much of a coward to face your problems. It wasn't a question, and Marcus didn't try to defend himself. You're right, he said simply. I was a coward. I staged a car accident, left just enough evidence to suggest I had died, and I ran. I took what little money I had left, changed my identity, and started over. Emma squeezed his hand tighter. We found newspaper articles about the accident, she said. Mom kept them in a box under her bed. She would take them out sometimes when she thought we were asleep, and she would cry. But she also kept a journal, and in it she wrote that she hoped you were alive somewhere, that you had found peace. The boardroom was silent again, but the quality of the silence had changed. It was no longer hostile, but rather heavy with the weight of a tragedy that had unfolded over years. Marcus continued, needing to finish his confession before his courage failed. I built this company from the ground up using my skills and the small amount of capital I had managed to hide. Everything I created, every innovation, every success was driven by guilt and a desperate need to prove that I could be someone worth remembering. I told myself that if I became successful enough, if I built something meaningful enough, somehow it would retroactively justify my choice. But nothing could ever justify what I did to Elena and to my daughters. David Park leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. So why reveal this now? He asked. Why not continue the deception? You could have had these children removed from the building. You could have denied everything. What changed? Marcus looked at Emma and Lily, at their brave faces and their amber eyes so much like his own. Because they found me, he said. Because they refuse to be invisible or forgotten. Because they deserve a father, even one as flawed and broken as I am. And because I'm tired of running. He turned his attention back to the board. I understand that this revelation has enormous implications for the company. I'm prepared to resign as CEO effective immediately. I'll cooperate fully with any legal proceedings. Whatever consequences I face, I'll accept them. But I wanted you to hear the truth from me, in front of witnesses, so there could be no doubt about what happened. Richard Thornton sat down slowly, his anger seemingly replaced by exhaustion. He looked like a man who had aged a decade in the span of minutes. Margaret Foster was the first to speak after a long, uncomfortable silence. Her voice was measured and thoughtful. Marcus, or Michael, or whatever we should call you, what you've done is reprehensible on a personal level. You abandoned your family, you lied to everyone who trusted you, and you've put this company in an incredibly precarious legal position. She paused, her gaze moving from Marcus to the two girls and back again. But I'm also looking at two children who somehow managed to track down a father who didn't want to be found, who walked into this building with nothing but determination and the hope that they might be acknowledged. That takes a kind of courage that I rarely see even in adults. Emma spoke up then, her voice strong despite the tremble Marcus could hear underneath. We didn't come here to destroy him, she said. We came because we wanted to know our father. We wanted to understand why he left and whether there was any chance he might want to be part of our lives again. Lily nodded in agreement. Mom always said that everyone deserves a chance at redemption. She said that mistakes don't define us, but what we do after we make them does. Marcus felt tears burning behind his eyes, threatening to spill over in front of the most powerful people in his professional world. These daughters, who had every right to hate him, who should have been demanding justice and revenge, were instead offering him something he had never dared to hope for. They were offering him forgiveness, or at least the possibility of it. The boardroom doors suddenly opened and Jennifer stepped inside with a strange expression on her face. Mr. Chun, she said hesitantly, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone else here to see you. She says it's urgent and she won't take no for an answer. A woman stepped past Jennifer into the boardroom and Marcus felt his heart stop for the second time that day. The woman was in her late 60s with silver hair pulled back in an elegant bun and sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. She looked around the boardroom with an expression of barely concealed disdain before her gaze settled on Marcus. Hello, Michael, she said, her voice crisp and clear. See, you've finally decided to stop pretending. Marcus's throat had gone completely dry. Castellano, he managed to whisper. Lena's mother, what are you doing here? The woman walked further into the room, her posture regal despite her age. She moved directly to where Emma and Lily stood and placed a protective hand on each girl's shoulder. I'm here because I received a very interesting phone call from my granddaughters this morning, she said. They told me they had found their father and were going to confront him. I told them I would give them exactly 1 hour before I followed because I wanted them to have the chance to do this on their own terms. She looked at Marcus with an expression that was equal parts fury and something he couldn't quite identify. But I'm also here to tell you something that these girls don't know yet. Something that Elena made me promise I would only reveal if you ever came back into their lives. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. What are you talking about? He asked. Mrs. Castellano's eyes glistened with tears, but her voice remained steady. Elena knew, Michael. She knew you were alive. She found out about 6 years ago, quite by accident. She saw a photo of Marcus Chun in a tech magazine and recognized you despite the changes. She hired a private investigator who confirmed her suspicions. The room seemed to tilt around Marcus. That's impossible, he breathed. She never tried to find me. She never exposed me. Mrs. Castellano smiled sadly. No, she didn't, because even after everything you did, even after you abandoned her and your children, she still loved you. And she understood something that you apparently didn't. She understood that you were sick, that the pressure and the shame had broken something inside you. So she made a choice. She decided to let you go, to give you the space to heal and become the person you needed to be. But she also made sure that when the time was right, when her daughters were old enough to understand, they would have the information they needed to find you. The manila folder Emma had brought contained more than just old documents. It contained the roadmap Elena had left for her daughters, a careful trail of breadcrumbs that would lead them to their father when they were ready. Marcus's legs finally gave out, and he sank into the nearest chair. Everything he thought he knew about his past was crumbling, revealing a truth that was somehow more painful than the guilt he had carried for 8 years. Elena had known. She had known he was alive, and she had chosen to protect him, to give him the chance at redemption even when he didn't deserve it. Emma and Lily moved closer to him, their small hands reaching out to touch his shoulders. The boardroom had transformed from a place of business into something far more intimate and raw. Marcus sat with his head in his hands, his carefully constructed world shattered into pieces around him. The board members sat in stunned silence, witnesses to a drama that transcended corporate concerns and touched something deeply human. Mrs. Castellano remained standing, her hands still resting protectively on her granddaughter's shoulders, a guardian angel watching over the children her daughter had left behind. Richard Thornton cleared his throat, breaking the heavy silence. His voice, when he spoke, had lost its sharp edge of anger and carried instead a note of weary resignation. I think we need to take a recess, he said. This situation is far more complex than any of us anticipated, and I believe we all need time to process what we've heard. He looked at Marcus with an expression that might have been sympathy. Marcus, take the rest of the day. Take the rest of the week if you need it. We'll reconvene on Monday to discuss the path forward. But right now, I think you need to be with your family. The word family hung in the air like a question mark. Marcus had not used that word in 8 years, had not allowed himself to think of himself as a father or as part of any unit larger than himself. Now it was being offered back to him like a gift he wasn't sure he deserved to receive. Margaret Foster stood, gathering her papers with efficient movements. Before you go, Marcus, she said, her tone businesslike but not unkind, I want you to know that while the board will need to address the legal and ethical implications of your deception, I personally believe that people can change. The man who built this company, who created technology that has helped millions of students access education they otherwise couldn't afford, that man is not the same person who ran away 8 years ago. She paused at the door. Don't waste the second chance you're being given. Not everyone gets one. As the board members filed out of the room, some shooting curious glances over their shoulders, others carefully avoiding eye contact, Marcus found himself alone with Mrs. Castellano and his daughters. The silence that settled over them was different from the charged atmosphere of moments before. It was softer, more tentative, like the first moments after a storm when the world is trying to remember how to be still. Mrs. Castellano moved to sit in one of the leather chairs, her movements deliberate and measured. She looked at Marcus with eyes that held decades of grief and wisdom. My daughter loved you until the day she died, she said quietly. Even when the cancer was eating her alive, even when she could barely speak, she would whisper your name, not with anger, but with hope. She hoped you had found peace, Michael. She hoped you had forgiven yourself because she had already forgiven you. The words were both a balm and a blade, offering comfort while cutting deep into the heart of his guilt. Marcus looked at this woman who had every reason to hate him, who had watched her daughter struggle as a single mother, who had stepped in to help raise the grandchildren he had abandoned. Why didn't you tell anyone? He asked, his voice hoarse. When Elena found out I was alive, why didn't she expose me? Why didn't you? Mrs. Castellano smiled sadly. Because Elena understood something that took me much longer to accept. She understood that revenge is a poison that hurts the one who carries it more than the one it's aimed at. She didn't want to destroy you, Michael. She wanted you to heal so that one day when her daughters were ready, you might be able to be the father they deserved. She looked at Emma and Lily with infinite tenderness. These girls are her legacy, and she wanted that legacy to include the possibility of redemption, not just for you, but for them. They deserved the chance to know their father, even if he was flawed. Emma, who had been silent through this exchange, suddenly spoke up. Her voice was small but clear, carrying the weight of questions she had obviously been holding inside. Grandmother, she said, turning to Mrs. Castellano, why didn't you tell us that Mom knew? Why did you let us think we were discovering him on our own? Mrs. Castellano reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind Emma's ear with a gesture so gentle it made Marcus's chest ache. Because your mother wanted you to find him when you were ready, not when I decided you should. She left you the tools, but she wanted the choice to be yours. And you both made it, she said, pride evident in her voice. You found him, you confronted him, and you did it with courage and grace. Emma looked at Marcus, her amber eyes searching his face. Do you wish we hadn't found you, she asked. The question was direct and devastating in its simplicity. Marcus slid from his chair to kneel on the floor in front of his daughters, bringing himself to their eye level. He looked at both of them, these brave, brilliant girls who had somehow grown into remarkable young people despite his absence. No, he said, his voice breaking. I wish I had never left. I wish I had been strong enough to stay, to face my problems, to be the father you deserved from the beginning. But since I can't change the past, I'm grateful that you found me. I'm grateful for the chance to know you, even if I don't deserve it. Lily, who had been the quieter of the two sisters, stepped forward and did something that shattered the last of Marcus's defenses. She took his right hand in both of hers and turned it over, examining the scar between his thumb and index finger. Her small fingers traced the crescent-shaped mark with careful attention. "Mom used to tell us about this scar," she said softly. "She said you got it when you were 12 years old, climbing a chain-link fence to retrieve a baseball. And the fence was rusty and a piece of metal cut deep, and you had to get 7 stitches. She said you were scared of needles, so she held your hand while the doctor worked, even though you had only been dating for a month." Marcus felt tears streaming freely down his face now, all pretense of control abandoned. "That's right," he whispered. "Your mother held my hand and she told me jokes to distract me from the pain. Terrible jokes that weren't even funny, but I laughed anyway because she was trying so hard." Emma took his left hand, and together the girls held both of his hands between their small ones. "Sir," Emma said, using the formal address almost playfully, "these are my dad's hands." She looked at Lily. "These are our dad's hands." The simple declaration, spoken with such certainty and ownership, echoed through the empty boardroom like a proclamation. Mrs. Castellano pressed a hand to her mouth, her eyes shining with tears. Marcus looked at his daughters, at their determined faces and their mother's features reflected in every expression, and he felt something shift inside him. The weight of guilt that he had carried for 8 years didn't disappear, but it was joined by something else, something lighter and warmer. It was hope, fragile and terrifying, but undeniably real. "Can we try?" he asked, the question directed at all three of them. "Can I try to be your father, even after everything I've done, even though I don't deserve a second chance?" Emma and Lily looked at each other, that twin communication passing between them in a glance that spoke volumes. Then they looked at their grandmother, seeking her approval or perhaps her blessing. Mrs. Castellano nodded slowly. "That's between you and your father, girls. But know that whatever you decide, I'm here for you. I'll always be here." Emma turned back to Marcus, her expression serious beyond her years. "You have to understand something," she said. "We're not little kids who don't know what happened. We know you left. We know you chose to disappear instead of fighting for us. That hurts, and it still hurts." Marcus nodded, not trying to defend himself or make excuses. "I understand," he said, "and I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for it, even though I know I never fully can." Lily spoke up then, her soft voice carrying a wisdom that seemed impossible in someone so young. "Mom used to say that love isn't about being perfect. She said it's about showing up, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." She paused, gathering her courage. "You didn't show up for 9 years, but you're here now. So we want to see if you can keep showing up. We want to try, but we're scared." Marcus pulled them both into an embrace, feeling their small bodies tense briefly before relaxing into his arms. Their heads barely reached his chest, and he could smell the apple shampoo in their hair. "I'm scared too," he admitted. "I'm terrified that I'll fail you again, that I won't know how to be what you need. But I promise you this, I will show up every day in every way I can. I will be here. I won't run away again." They stood like that for a long moment, 3 people trying to build a bridge across 8 years of absence and pain. Mrs. Castellano watched from her chair, her expression a complex mixture of grief for her daughter who should have been here to see this moment, and cautious hope for the future that might be possible. When they finally pulled apart, Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "So what happens now?" she asked practically. "We're in foster care. We don't have anywhere permanent to live. Grandmother's been trying to get custody, but the courts are slow." Marcus looked at Mrs. Castellano. "I want to file for custody," he said. "I want to bring them home. Is that even possible, given everything?" Mrs. Castellano considered this carefully. "It will be complicated," she said. "Your legal identity is Marcus Chun, but their father on record is Michael Torres, who is legally deceased. You'll need to sort out that mess first. And then there's the question of whether you're a suitable guardian, given that you abandoned them once before." Her tone was matter of fact, not cruel, simply stating the reality of their situation. "But if you're serious about this, if you're truly committed, then I'll support you. For Elena's sake and for these girls. They deserve a father if that father's work." Marcus nodded, his mind already racing through the logistics. "I have resources now that I didn't have before. I can hire the best lawyers, get the identity issue resolved, prove that I can provide for them." He looked at his daughters. "I have a house. It's big, probably too big for one person. It has extra bedrooms, a backyard, good schools nearby. You could have your own rooms, space to grow, stability." Emma raised an eyebrow, a gesture so reminiscent of her mother that it made Marcus's heart skip. "We're not asking for a mansion," she said. "We're asking if you're going to be our dad, not just a rich guy who feels guilty." Marcus smiled despite himself, recognizing the challenge in her words. "You're right," he said. "Being your dad has nothing to do with the house or the money. It's about showing up at school plays and helping with homework and being there when you're scared or sad or angry. It's about all the small, ordinary moments that add up to a life together. I can't promise I'll be good at it right away. I don't have any practice, and I'm going to make mistakes, but I can promise that I'll try, and I'll keep trying no matter how hard it gets." Lily looked at him with those amber eyes that were so much like his own. "We're going to be hard," she warned. "We have a lot of anger and hurt, and it's going to come out sometime. We might yell at you or tell you we hate you when we're upset." Marcus knelt down again, meeting her gaze directly. "I understand," he said, "and I'll be here for all of it. The anger and the hurt and the difficult moments, because that's what parents do. They don't run away when things get hard. They stay and they love their children through the mess." A slight smile touched Lily's lips, the first real smile he had seen from her. "Okay," she said simply. "Let's try." Mrs. Castellano stood, smoothing her skirt with practiced hand. "I think it's time we left this building," she said. "We have a lot to discuss, and this boardroom is not the place for it. Marcus, you have my number. Call me this evening and we'll start figuring out the practical details. But for now, I think these girls could use some lunch and some time to process everything that's happened this morning." Marcus stood as well, suddenly aware of how drained he felt, as if the emotional toll of the past hour had physically exhausted him. "You're right," he said. "Let me take you all to lunch." They gathered their belongings and headed toward the elevator. As they walked through the now empty executive floor, Marcus was acutely aware of the strange group they formed: a CEO in an expensive suit, two 9-year-old girls in school uniforms, and an elegant elderly woman, all connected by threads of grief and hope and the possibility of redemption. When they reached the elevator, Emma pressed the button and turned to look back at the boardroom they had just left. "That was brave, what you did in there," she said, "telling everyone the truth even though it might cost you everything." Marcus followed her gaze, looking at the closed doors that hid the scene of his confession. "It was the least brave thing I've done in 8 years," he said. "The brave thing would have been staying in the first place, facing my problems instead of running from them." "You're being brave now," Lily said quietly. "That has to count for something." The restaurant Marcus chose was deliberately unpretentious. A small Italian place tucked into a quiet side street, far from the glass towers and power lunch spots where he usually conducted business. The owner, a woman named Rosa who had immigrated from Naples 30 years ago, greeted them with warm efficiency and led them to a corner booth with red vinyl seats and checkered tablecloths. It was the kind of place where families came for Sunday dinners, where the portions were generous and the atmosphere forgiving. Emma and Lily slid into one side of the booth while Marcus and Mrs. Castellano took the other. The girls immediately began studying the laminated menus with intense concentration, whispering to each other about whether they should order pizza or pasta. Marcus watched them, marveling at how ordinary the moment felt. Just a family having lunch, as if the dramatic confrontation in the boardroom had been a strange dream. But the tension was still there, humming beneath the surface like an electrical current waiting to spark. Mrs. Castellano ordered a glass of red wine, and when it arrived, she took a long, thoughtful sip before speaking. "I need you to understand something, Michael," she said, using his birth name deliberately. "What you're proposing, becoming an active father after 8 years of absence, is not going to be simple or easy. These girls have been through trauma that most adults couldn't handle. They've lost their mother, been placed in foster care, separated temporarily, and now they're confronting a father who chose to disappear. The road ahead is going to be difficult, and there will be days when all of you question whether this was the right decision." Marcus nodded, grateful for her directness. He had spent 8 years in a world where people said what they thought he wanted to hear, where honest criticism was wrapped in layers of corporate politeness. Mrs. Castellano's bluntness was refreshing and necessary. "I know," he said. "I've been thinking about nothing else since they walked into my office. I need to find a good therapist. Probably for all of us. Family counseling, individual sessions for the girls. I need to learn how to be a parent. Really learn, not just wing it." Emma looked up from her menu, her expression guarded. "Are you going to send us to therapy because we're broken?" she asked. And there was a defensive edge to her voice that spoke of past judgments and well-meaning adults who had treated them as problems to be solved. Marcus shook his head quickly. "No," he said firmly. "You're not broken, but I am, and I need help heal. And I think it would be good for us to have a safe space where we can talk about all the complicated feelings we're going to have as we figure out how to be a family. A place where you can say anything you need to say, even if it's angry or hurtful, and know that it's okay." Lily considered this, her fingers tracing patterns on the tablecloth. "In foster care, they made us see a counselor," she said. "She was nice, but she asked the same questions every week. How are you feeling? What are you angry about?" Sometimes we just wanted to not talk about it, to just be kids for a while. "That makes sense," Marcus said. "Grief isn't something you can schedule. Sometimes you need to feel it, and sometimes you need a break from it." The waiter arrived to take their orders, and for a few minutes they occupied themselves with the mundane task of choosing food. Emma ordered spaghetti carbonara, Lily chose lasagna, and Marcus asked for chicken parmesan without really tasting what he was saying. Mrs. Castellano ordered a Caesar salad and gave him a look that suggested she knew he was just going through the motion. When the waiter left, she leaned forward, her expression serious. "There's something else we need to discuss," she said. "The practical matters of custody and identity are complicated, but there's something more immediate. The girls' belongings, everything they have left of their mother and their childhood, is currently in storage or scattered across 3 different foster homes. They need stability, Michael, and they need it soon." Marcus pulled out his phone, his fingers moving with the swift efficiency of someone accustomed to solving problems. "I'll make some calls," he said. "I can have a team pack up whatever's in storage and move it to my house by the end of the week. As for the foster homes, we'll need to coordinate with social services to collect their belongings. Mrs. Castellano, if you could help me navigate that system, I'd be grateful." Emma interrupted, her voice sharp. "Stop," she said, and everyone looked at her in surprise. "You're doing it again. You're treating this like a business problem. Hire some people, throw money at it, check it off a list. But our stuff isn't just stuff, it's our mom's things. Her journals, her photos, the sweater she wore when she was sick. We don't want strangers packing it up. We want to be there. We want to touch everything and decide what matters and what doesn't. The rebuke stung, but Marcus recognized it for what it was, a test. His daughters were watching to see if he would listen, if he would truly hear what they needed rather than imposing his own solution. You're absolutely right, he said, putting his phone down on the table. I'm sorry. I spent 8 years in a world where every problem has a solution if you just apply enough resources. But this isn't that kind of situation. This is your mother's life, your history, and you should be the ones to handle. When do you want to go through her thing? Emma's defensive posture softened slightly. Really? She asked. You'll come with us? You'll help us go through it? If you want me there, then yes, Marcus said. Absolutely. Or if you'd rather do it with just your grandmother, I understand that too. Whatever you need. Lily spoke up, her voice tentative. There's a box, she said. Mom called it the memory box. She kept it on the top shelf of her closet. We weren't supposed to know about it, but we saw her looking through it sometimes when she was sad. After she died, we found it, but we haven't been able to open it. It felt too private, like we'd be invading something that was just hers. Mrs. Castellano's eyes widened slightly. I didn't know about any memory box, she said. What's in it? We don't know exactly, Emma said, but we think it has things from when she and Dad were together. Old photos, maybe letters, things she couldn't let go of even after he disappeared. The revelation hung in the air, laden with implication. Elena had kept a box of memory, a shrine to a man who had abandoned her, hidden away where her daughters couldn't see her grief. Marcus felt the weight of that knowledge settle over him like a heavy blanket. She kept pieces of our life together, he said quietly, more to himself than to anyone else. Even after everything I did, she kept pieces of me. The food arrived and they ate in relative silence, each person lost in their own thoughts. Marcus found himself watching his daughters, cataloging their mannerisms and preferences. Emma ate her pasta with deliberate precision, twirling exactly 3 strands on her fork each time. Lily kept pushing the ricotta cheese to the side of her lasagna, clearly not a fan. These were the small details that parents learn naturally over years of daily contact, the intimate knowledge that came from shared meals and ordinary moments. He had missed all of it, and now he was trying to catch up, scrambling to learn his own children. When the plates were cleared and dessert menus were distributed, Emma suddenly asked a question that changed the entire tenor of the meal. Did you ever think about us? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. In those 8 years, did you wonder what we looked like, or whether we were happy, or if we needed you? Marcus put down his menu and looked at her directly. Every single day, he said. I thought about you constantly. I would see children your age and wonder if you looked like them. I'd pass schools and imagine you in classrooms, making friends, learning. I told myself I was staying away for your benefit, that you were better off without me. But the truth is, I thought about you all the time. Lily's eyes were bright with unshed tears. If you thought about us every day, how did you stay away? She asked. How did you not come back? It's the hardest question anyone had ever asked him, and it deserved an honest answer. Because I was ashamed, Marcus said. Because every day that passed made it harder to imagine coming back. How do you show up after a year and explain where you've been? After 2 years? After 5? The shame grew bigger and bigger until it felt impossible to overcome. I convinced myself that too much time had passed, that you wouldn't want to know me, that I'd cause more harm than good by reappearing. I told myself I was being selfless, but I was really being a coward. Mrs. Castellano set down her wine glass with a soft clink. Elena struggled with that same question. She said, after she discovered you were alive, she spent months deciding what to do. Should she contact you? Should she expose you? Should she tell the girls? In the end, she decided that the choice should be theirs when they were old enough to make it. She wanted them to find you on their own terms, not as children being handed back to a father who had abandoned them, but as young women who could choose whether to forgive. Emma wiped her eyes with her napkin. Mom was always so strong, she said. Everyone said so. Even when she was dying, she never complained or cried in front of us. But sometimes I wish she had. I wish she'd let us see that she was scared or sad or angry. It would have made her seem more real, less like a saint we could never live up to. That's one of the gifts of pain, Mrs. Castellano said gently. It teaches us that we don't have to be perfect. Your mother wanted to protect you from her suffering, but in doing so, she may have set an impossible standard. The best thing you can do is allow yourselves to be messy and complicated and human. Marcus leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. I want you to know that I'm not going to try to replace your mother or pretend I can fill the hole she left. Nobody could do that. But I can be here now, imperfect and trying, and show you that it's okay to be angry with me, to grieve, to be confused about what comes next. We're going to figure this out together, and it's going to be messy, but we're going to do it. The waiter brought the dessert menus, but nobody really looked at them. The conversation had moved beyond food, beyond the ordinary rituals of a restaurant meal. They were negotiating the terms of a new relationship, testing boundaries, establishing what was possible. After a moment, Lily pushed her menu aside and said something that surprised everyone. Can we see where you live? She asked. Your house. We want to see the place where you've been living while we were growing up without you. Marcus felt a flutter of anxiety. His house was beautiful, modern, expensive, a monument to the success he had achieved, but it was also sterile and impersonal, decorated by professionals who had created a showplace rather than a home. It was the house of a man who didn't expect to share his space with anyone, who valued privacy and perfection over comfort and lived in warmth. Of course, he said, despite his misgiving. We can go right now if you'd like. The drive to his house took 30 minutes, winding through increasingly affluent neighborhoods until they reached a gated community with manicured lawns and houses set back from the street. Marcus's home was a modern architectural statement. All clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows, with a 3-car garage and a lap pool visible through the glass walls. He pulled into the driveway and turned off the engine, suddenly seeing his house through his daughter's eyes. Emma stared at the structure, her expression unreadable. "You live here," she said. "Alone?" Marcus nodded, feeling absurdly defensive. "It seemed like a good investment at the time," he said weakly. Lily unbuckled her seatbelt and opened the car door. "It doesn't look like anyone lives here," she observed. "It looks like a museum." As they walked toward the front door, Marcus realized his daughters were right. He had built a beautiful prison, a place to hide from his past rather than a place to build a future. Marcus unlocked the front door and stepped aside to let his daughters and Mrs. Castellano enter first. The interior was exactly as sterile as the exterior suggested. The foyer opened into a vast living space with polished concrete floors, minimal furniture in shades of gray and white, and abstract art pieces that looked expensive but conveyed no emotion whatsoever. The kitchen was a chef's dream with gleaming stainless steel appliances that appeared to have never been used. Everything was perfectly clean, perfectly arranged, and perfectly lifeless. Emma walked slowly through the space, her footsteps echoing off the hard surfaces. "Where are the pictures?" she asked. "Don't you have any photos? Any books? Anything that shows who you are?" Marcus looked around his home with fresh eyes and felt a crushing sense of emptiness. The truth was, he had deliberately kept the space impersonal. Photos would have meant memories, memories would have meant confronting his past, and he had spent 8 years running from exactly that. "I travel a lot for work," he said, the excuse sounding hollow even to his own ears. "I guess I never got around to making it feel like home." "That's sad," Lily said simply, and the observation carried no judgment, just a statement of fact that cut deeper than any criticism could have. Mrs. Castellano wandered over to the floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over a perfectly manicured backyard. The grass was green and precisely cut, the hedges trimmed into geometric shapes, the pool shimmering and unused. "It's beautiful," she said carefully, "but I can see what the girls mean. It doesn't feel lived in. It feels like you've been hiding here rather than living here." Marcus sank onto one of the pristine white sofas, suddenly exhausted by the weight of his own choices. "You're right," he admitted. "I built this place as a fortress, somewhere I could be alone with my guilt and my work. I never intended to share it with anyone. I never thought I deserved to." Emma sat down on the opposite end of the sofa, carefully keeping distance between them. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "It's going to sound mean, but I need to know." Marcus braced himself. "Anything," he said. "You can ask me anything." She took a deep breath. "When you built your company and got rich and famous, didn't you think about finding us then? You had resources, connections, money to make any problem go away. You could have hired lawyers to fix your identity issues or private investigators to check on us. But you didn't. Why?" The question struck at the heart of his deepest shame. "Because I was terrified," he said. "The more successful I became, the more I had to lose. I told myself that I was protecting what I'd built, that exposure would destroy the company and hurt all the people who depended on it. But the real reason was simpler and more selfish. I was afraid you'd reject me. I was afraid I'd see the hurt in your eyes and know that I had caused it." Lily had been exploring the kitchen, opening cabinets and finding them mostly empty except for coffee and protein bars. "You don't really live here, do you?" she called out. "Not in the way normal people live. You just exist here." Marcus couldn't argue with her assessment. She was absolutely right. He had been existing, not living, moving through the motions of a successful life while remaining emotionally frozen in the moment he had walked away from his family. Miss Castellano joined Lily in the kitchen and began opening the refrigerator, which contained precisely 6 items, including bottled water, energy drinks, and takeout containers. "Michael," she said, using his real name like a gentle reprimand, "if the girls are going to live here, this house is going to need to change dramatically. Children need warmth, color, life. They need a home, not a showroom." Emma stood up and walked to the staircase that led to the second floor. "Can we see the bedrooms?" she asked. Marcus led them upstairs, where 4 pristine guest rooms sat empty and untouched. Each was decorated in the same minimalist style with hotel-like furniture and absolutely no personality. The girls walked through each room, their expressions growing more troubled with each door they opened. "These aren't bedrooms," Emma said finally. "They're just rooms. There's nothing here that says anyone cares about who might sleep in them." Marcus felt his inadequacy like a physical weight. "I know," he said. "I'm sorry. We can change them. We can paint them any color you want, get new furniture, put up posters or photos, whatever would make them feel like yours." Lily turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "But that's not really the point, is it?" she said with wisdom beyond her 9 years. "You can buy us fancy furniture and paint the walls purple, but that doesn't make it home. Home is about the people, not the stuff." Mrs. Castellano placed a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder. "She's right, but that doesn't mean you can't learn," she said. "Your house reflects who you've been for the past 8 years, a man in hiding. But if you're serious about becoming a father, about building a family, then you need to let them transform this space. Let them make it messy. Let them fill it with noise and color and all the chaos that comes with children. It won't be peaceful or perfect anymore, but it will be alive. The four of them stood in the hallway of the second floor, surrounded by empty rooms waiting to be filled with purpose. Marcus realized that this house was a metaphor for his entire life, beautiful on the surface, successful by every external measure, but hollow at its core. His daughters were offering him the chance to change that, to trade perfection for something real and messy and infinitely more valuable. "Can I show you something?" Marcus said suddenly. He led them to the master bedroom at the end of the hall, a space he had kept deliberately separate from the rest of the house. Unlike the other rooms, this one had a lived-in quality. The bed was unmade, books were stacked on the nightstand, and a laptop sat open on the desk. But more significantly, there was a drawer in the desk that he had never shown anyone. He opened it now, feeling as though he was exposing his deepest wound. Inside were newspaper clippings, printed internet articles, and photographs. All of them were about Elena and the girls. He'd been tracking their lives from afar, a silent ghost watching from the shadows. Emma moved closer, staring down at the collection with wide eyes. "You were watching us," she said, and her tone was complex, containing both violation and something that might have been relief. Marcus picked up one of the photos, a grainy image printed from a newspaper article about a local school science fair. Elena stood in the background smiling as she watched her daughters present their project on solar energy. "You won second place," he said quietly. "You built a model house that ran entirely on solar panels. I read about it online and I was so proud, even though I had no right to be." Lily reached into the drawer and pulled out another article, this one from a community newsletter. It showed the two girls at a charity run wearing matching numbers and holding a banner that read, "Running for Mom. We did that 6 months before she died," Lily said, her voice thick with emotion. "We raised money for cancer research. She was already sick by then, but she came to watch us finish the race. She was so weak she could barely stand, but she was there." Marcus sat down on the edge of his bed, the weight of 8 years of distant observation pressing down on him. "I know I don't have the right to claim any part of your lives," he said. "I wasn't there for any of these moments. I didn't help with homework or bandage scraped knees or comfort you after nightmares. But I need you to know that I never stopped caring, even when I was too broken to do anything about it." Merce. Castellano was examining the contents of the drawer with a mixture of sadness and understanding. "Elena would have found this both heartbreaking and hopeful," she said. "She always believed that people were capable of change, that redemption was possible even for those who had committed terrible wrong. I think she would have wanted you to show the girls this, to let them see that you never truly let go." Emma picked up a small faded photograph that had been tucked into the corner of the drawer. It showed a much younger Marcus and Elena on their wedding day, both of them grinning with the kind of unguarded joy that comes from believing the future holds only good things. "You looked happy," Emma said. "Both of you, what happened? How do you go from this to abandoning your family?" It was the central question, the one that demanded an honest answer no matter how painful the truth might be. Marcus took the photo from her, studying the faces of two people who seemed like strangers now. "We were happy," he said. "For a while we were incredibly happy, but I had problems that I hid from your mother. I was ambitious to the point of recklessness, always chasing the next opportunity, the next investment. I borrowed money I couldn't repay, made deals with people who didn't forgive debt. When everything started to collapse, I was too proud to ask for help." Lily sat down beside him on the bed, close but not touching. "Mom told us you were a good man," she said. "She said you were kind and funny and that you made her feel safe. Was that true, or was she just trying to make us feel better about having a dad who left?" "It was true," Marcus said. "I was those things. Or at least I tried to be. But I was also weak and scared, and I let my fear turn me into someone I didn't recognize. The man your mother married was real, but so was the man who ran away. They were both me, and I have to live with that." Mrs. Castellano checked her watch and sighed. "I need to get the girls back to their foster home soon," she said. "They have a curfew, and we don't want to cause problems with social services while we're trying to navigate the custody." Marcus felt a sudden, desperate panic at the thought of them leaving. "Please," he said, not caring how it sounded. "Can they stay? Just for tonight? I have plenty of space, and we could order pizza, watch movies, start getting to know each other." Emma and Lily looked at each other, that silent twin communication passing between them again. Then Emma shook her head. "Not yet," she said. "This is all happening so fast, and we need time to think. We need to talk to each other and to grandmother about what we want. You can't just have us back because you suddenly decided you're ready to be a dad. We get to decide too." The rejection stung, but Marcus recognized the wisdom. They were setting boundaries, asserting their right to control the pace of this reconciliation. It was healthy and mature, and it proved that despite everything they had been through, his daughters were strong and self-aware. "You're absolutely right," he said. "I'm sorry. I'm moving too fast because I'm trying to make up for lost time, but that's not fair to you. We'll go at whatever pace you're comfortable with, Mars." Castellano gathered the girls and they headed back downstairs. At the front door, Marcus felt a familiar fear rising in his chest, the terror that once they left, they might not come back, that this fragile connection might snap. "When can I see you again?" he asked, trying to keep the desperation out of his voice. Emma considered the question seriously. "We have school tomorrow," she said, "and we need time to process everything that happened today. Maybe this weekend? You could come to the foster home and we could go somewhere together. Somewhere normal, not fancy, just to talk and get to know each other," Lily added. "And maybe bring some of Mom's things from storage, the ones you said you'd help us go through. We want to do that with you there. It feels right somehow, opening that memory box with our dad present. Even if he wasn't there for the memories, he can be there when we revisit them. Marcus felt tears threatening again, but he held them back. This weekend, he promised. Wherever you want to go, whatever you want to do, I'll be there. As he watched them drive away, Mrs. Castellano's car disappearing down the perfectly maintained street, Marcus stood alone in his perfect empty house. He looked around at the sterile spaces and realized that everything needed to change. It's not just the physical house, but the man who lived in it. He pulled out his phone and began making calls. The first was to his lawyer to discuss the complex process of reclaiming his original identity while protecting his business interests. The second was to a therapist who specialized in family reunification. The third was to a moving company to schedule a pickup of Elena's belongings from storage. He worked late into the night, driven by a desperate need to prove that this time he wouldn't run away. This time he would stay and face the complicated, painful, beautiful work of becoming a father again. The week that followed Marcus's confession moved with the surreal quality of a dream. He went to work each morning, navigating the stairs and whispered conversations that followed him through the hallways of Chun. Technologies like a shadow he couldn't shake. Some employees looked at him with sympathy, others with barely concealed contempt, and still others with the kind of morbid curiosity reserved for watching someone's life unravel in real time. The board had called an emergency meeting for Monday morning, and Marcus spent the intervening days preparing for the possibility that his career, the empire he had built from guilt and ambition, might come crashing down. But more importantly, he spent the week preparing for Saturday. He researched child psychologists and family therapists, reading reviews and credentials until his eyes burned. He contacted the storage facility where Elena's belongings had been kept and arranged for a private viewing, room where he and the girls could go through her things without the cold efficiency of a warehouse setting. He spoke with his lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia Chun, no relation, who listened to his story with the kind of professional detachment that came from years of hearing impossible situations, and began the complex process of legally reconciling Michael Torres with Marcus Chun. On Thursday evening, his phone rang. It was Emma, calling from Mastelano's house where the girls were spending the night before returning to their foster placement. Her voice sounded small and uncertain, so different from the fierce determination she had displayed in his boardroom. "Hi," she said simply, and then seemed unsure how to continue. Marcus felt his heart rate accelerate. "Hi," he replied, trying to sound calm and approachable. "How are you?" There was a long pause, and he could hear muffled voices in the background, probably Lily coaching her sister. "We were wondering," Emma finally said, "if maybe you could come to our school thing tomorrow. It's just a small assembly, nothing important. We're supposed to bring family if we have any, and grandmother said she would come, but we thought maybe you could too, if you're not too busy." The request was casual, almost throwaway, but Marcus understood the weight behind it. This was a test. A chance to show that he meant what he said about being present. "What time?" he asked him. 3 o'clock, Emma said. "It's at Franklin Elementary, room 104. It's just a stupid presentation about community helpers. We have to talk about firefighters and police officers. It's really boring." "I'll be there," Marcus promised. "And it's not stupid. If it matters to you, it matters to me." He could hear the smile in Emma's voice when she replied. "Okay," she said. "See you tomorrow." After she hung up, Marcus sat in his empty living room and realized he was grinning like an idiot. His daughter had called him. She had invited him to something. It was a small thing, a tiny crack in the wall between them, but it felt monumental. Friday afternoon found Marcus sitting in a child-sized chair in room 104 of Franklin Elementary, his knees almost touching his chest, surrounded by parents and grandparents who cast curious glances his way. Merce Castellano sat beside him, elegant and composed despite the absurdly small furniture. She leaned over and whispered, "Breathe, Michael. You look like you're about to pass out." He realized she was right. His palms were sweating and his heart was racing as if he were about to deliver a keynote speech to thousands of people rather than watch a simple school presentation. "I know what to do," he whispered back. "What if they get nervous and I make it worse by being here? What if this was a mistake?" Mrs. Castellano patted his hand with surprising gentleness. "Then you'll be there for them anyway," she said. "That's what parents do. They show up even when it's awkward or uncomfortable, especially then." The presentation began with a teacher introducing the concept of community helpers, and various children stood to share what they had learned. Some kids were confident and theatrical, clearly loving the attention. Others mumbled their way through prepared speeches while staring at their shoes. When it was Emma and Lily's turn, they stood together at the front of the classroom, and Marcus felt his breath catch. They had prepared a joint presentation, speaking in alternating sentences with the kind of synchronized rhythm that only twins could achieve. Emma started by talking about firefighters and the importance of courage in helping others. Lily continued with information about paramedics and the value of compassion. Together they built a narrative about how the best helpers were people who had overcome their own fears and failures to serve their communities. As they spoke, Marcus realized with a jolt that they weren't really talking about firefighters and paramedics. They were talking about them, about forgiveness and second chances, messages about how people who had made mistakes could still choose to help others. It was a message delivered with the innocent guise of a school assignment, but it was clearly meant for the adults in the room, particularly for him. When they finished, the class applauded politely and the girls returned to their seats. Emma caught his eye for just a moment and gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. He understood. She was telling him that they were trying, that they saw his efforts, that maybe, just maybe, there was hope. After the assembly ended, parents milled around talking to teachers and collecting their children. Marcus stood awkwardly near the door, unsure of the protocol. Should he approach the girls, wait for them to come to him, leave quietly? Mrs. Castellano solved the problem by walking directly to where Emma and Lily were gathering their backpacks and gesturing for him to follow. The girls looked up as he approached, and for a moment nobody spoke. Then Lily broke the silence. "You came," she said, and there was surprise in her voice, as if despite his promise she hadn't quite believed he would show up. "Of course I came," Marcus said. "You invited me." That was a wonderful presentation, by the way. Very insightful. Emma adjusted her backpack straps, a gesture that seemed designed to hide her nervousness. "Did you understand what we were really saying?" she asked directly. "About second chances and community helpers who had made mistakes." Marcus knelt down so he was at their eye level, not caring that other parents were watching with interest. "I understood," he said, "and I want you to know that I don't take it for granted. Every chance you give me, every moment like this, it's a gift I know I don't deserve." Their teacher, a kind-looking woman in her 50s, approached with a clipboard and a professional smile. "You must be the girl's father," she said, and the label hung in the air like a question. Marcus looked at Emma and Lily, waiting for them to correct her or confirm it. It was their choice how to define him. Emma took a breath and said, "Yes, this is our dad. He's been away for a while, but he's back now." The simple statement, delivered with such matter-of-fact acceptance, made Marcus's eyes burn with unshed tears. The teacher nodded, making a note on her clipboard. "Wonderful," she said. "It's always nice to see families coming together. Girls, don't forget you have the field trip permission slips due Monday." As they walked out of the school together, Mrs. Castellano a few steps ahead to give them space. Lily slipped her hand into Marcus's. The gesture was sudden and unexpected, her small fingers warm against his palm. He looked down at her in surprise, and she didn't meet his eyes, just kept walking as if holding her father's hand was the most natural thing in the world. Emma walked on his other side, not touching him but close enough that their arms occasionally brushed. "So," Emma said, breaking the charged silence, "are we still doing the storage thing tomorrow? Going through Mom's stuff?" Marcus nodded, not trusting his voice for a moment. "Yes," he finally managed. "I've arranged for a private room at the facility. We can take our time, and if it gets too hard, we can stop whenever you need to." Lily looked up at him, her amber eyes so like his own. "Will you tell us stories," she asked, "about Mom and you back when things were good? We know how it ended, but we don't really know how it began. We don't know what she was like when she was happy before everything got complicated." "I will," Marcus promised. "I'll tell you everything I remember. The good parts, the funny parts, even the embarrassing parts. You deserve to know your mother as more than just the woman who was strong enough to raise you alone. You deserve to know her as a person who laughed and made terrible jokes and couldn't cook to save her life but tried anyway." Emma smiled at that. She really was a terrible cook, she confirmed. Even at the end, when she could barely stand, she insisted on making us dinner. We ate so much burnt pasta and undercooked chicken, but we never complained because we knew she was trying to show us love the only way she had energy for. They reached Mrs. Castellano's car in the parking lot, and the moment of parting arrived with its familiar awkwardness. Marcus wanted to hug his daughters, to hold them close and never let go, but he knew better than to push. He had to let them control the pace, had to respect their boundaries even when it hurt. Emma surprised him by stepping forward and wrapping her arms around his waist in a quick, fierce hug. "Thanks for coming," she said into his shirt. It meant something. Before he could respond, she had already pulled away and climbed into the car. Lily hugged him too, but her embrace lasted a few seconds longer. "Tomorrow," she whispered. "Don't forget." As if he could forget. As if anything in the world could be more important than this. That night, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in his bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of the afternoon in his mind. The way Emma had called him dad to her teacher, the weight of Lily's hand in his, the presentation that had been a coded message of hope. He got up and wandered through his house, seeing it with fresh eyes. The girls were right. It wasn't a home. It was a museum dedicated to his own isolation, a monument to 8 years of running from himself. He made a decision. Starting tomorrow, after they went through Elena's belongings, he would let the girls help him transform this space. He would let them paint walls and hang pictures and make a mess. He would trade his carefully curated perfection for the beautiful chaos of family life. Saturday morning arrived with brilliant sunshine and a sky so blue it looked painted. Marcus picked up Mrs. Castellano and the girls at 9 o'clock, and they drove in near silence to the storage facility on the edge of town. The building was a sprawling complex of identical units, but Marcus had arranged for them to use a small conference room that the facility kept for estate sales and family viewings. It was a simple space with a large table, comfortable chairs, and good lighting. Elena's belongings were already there, carefully organized boxes stacked along one wall, each labeled in Mrs. Castellano's precise handwriting. Clothing, kitchen items, books, photos, and one box marked simply personal. Emma and Lily stood in the doorway, suddenly hesitant. It was one thing to talk about going through their mother's things, another to actually do it. Marcus understood their fear. Opening these boxes meant confronting the finality of her death, accepting that she was truly gone, and all that remained were objects and memories. "Can we start with the photos?" Lily asked quietly. "I want to see her face. I'm starting to forget exactly what she looked like, and it scares me." Mrs. Castellano retrieved the photo box and placed it gently on the table. They gathered around it, and when she lifted the lid, the scent of old paper and faded perfume wafted out. It smelled like Alina, and for a moment Marcus was transported back 8 years to a time when that scent meant home. The photos told the story of a life lived with courage and grace. There were pictures of Elena as a young woman, laughing with friends, graduating from college, starting her first job. There were wedding photos showing her and Marcus on the happiest day of their lives, both of them impossibly young and full of hope. And then there were the baby photos, countless images of Emma and Lily at various stages of infancy and childhood. Marcus appeared in the early ones, holding his tiny daughters with the terrified expression of a new father, but then he vanished from the narrative like a ghost. The remaining photos showed Elena alone with the girls, documenting birthday parties and first days of school and ordinary moments made extraordinary by her presence. Emma picked up a photo of Elena holding both girls on their first birthday, their chubby baby faces smeared with chocolate cake. She was smiling at the camera, but Marcus could see the exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of single parenthood already beginning to show. "She looks so tired here," Emma said softly. "I never noticed it before, but she looks like she's barely holding it together." Marcus took the photo gently, studying it with the perspective of someone who now understood the full scope of what Elena had carried alone. "She was working 2 jobs at that point," he said quietly. "I kept track as much as I could from a distance. She was teaching during the day and doing bookkeeping at night. Your grandmother helped, but Elena was determined to provide for you herself. She was so proud, so strong." Lily was sifting through more recent photos, ones that showed the progression of Elena's illness, though she had clearly tried to hide it. Here she was noticeably thinner, her smile a little more strained. Here she wore a headscarf in cheerful patterns, her hair gone from treatments. And here, in what must have been one of the last photos, she sat between her daughters at their 9th birthday party just 3 months before she died. Her arm around each of them, her face gaunt but her eyes blazing with fierce love. "I remember this day," Lily whispered, tracing her mother's face in the photograph. "She could barely sit up, but she insisted on being there for the whole party. She made us promise we'd always take care of each other, that we'd stay together no matter what. At the time, I thought she was just being dramatic. I didn't understand she was saying goodbye." Mr. Castellano had moved to the window, giving the family space but remaining close enough to provide support if needed. Marcus saw her shoulders shaking slightly and realized she was crying silently, grief for her daughter mixing with the strange hope of this moment. He wanted to comfort her. This woman who had every right to hate him but had instead chosen to support his reconciliation with his daughters, but he didn't know how. Emma was the one who spoke, her voice cutting through the heavy emotion in the room. "Tell us a story," she said, looking up at Marcus. "You promised you would tell us about the good times. Tell us something that made Mom laugh. Tell us who she was before she had to be so strong all the time." Marcus sat down at the table, pulling the chair close to his daughters. He thought for a moment, sifting through memories he had kept locked away for so long that accessing them felt like opening a rusty gate. "Your mother," he began, "had this laugh that was absolutely ridiculous. It started normal, but if something was really funny, it would escalate into this snorting, wheezing sound that was somehow funnier than whatever joke had started it." He smiled at the memory. "One time we went to a movie theater to see this serious drama, something she'd been wanting to watch for weeks, but the couple in front of us kept whispering commentary through the whole thing, and they were so absurdly wrong about everything that was happening on screen that Elena started giggling." The girls leaned forward, hungry for these glimpses of their mother as a full person rather than just the strong single parent they'd known. "She tried so hard to keep quiet," Marcus continued, "because the theater was packed and people kept shushing us, but that just made it worse. She'd bite her lip and her shoulders would shake, and then she'd look at me with these desperate eyes trying to communicate that she couldn't stop. Finally, she just gave up and buried her face in my shoulder while she laughed so hard she was crying. We got kicked out of the theater. The manager was furious, said we were disrupting a serious film, and your mother, still laughing, apologized while we walked out, and then once we were in the parking lot she laughed even harder. We never did find out how that movie ended." Lily was smiling now, a real genuine smile that reached her eyes. "Mom never told us she got kicked out of a movie theater," she said. "She always seemed so proper, so together." "That's because she wanted to be strong for you," Marcus said. "But before she had to carry the weight of everything alone, she was funny and spontaneous and sometimes ridiculous in the best way." Emma pulled another photo from the box, this one showing Marcus and Elena on a hiking trail, both of them muddy and disheveled and grinning at the camera. "What's this one?" she asked. Marcus laughed, the memory flooding back with surprising clarity. "That was the great hiking disaster," he said. "We decided to go on what was supposed to be an easy trail, but we took a wrong turn and ended up lost. We hiked for 6 hours through increasingly difficult terrain. Elena twisted her ankle, we ran out of water, and I got stung by a bee. By the time we found our way back to the car, we were sunburned, dehydrated, and covered in mud." He paused, the sweetness of the memory almost painful, "and it was one of the best days of my life. We laughed the whole way home about what a disaster it had been." She said it was proof that we could survive anything as long as we were together. The irony of that statement, given what came later, wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Mrs. Castellano turned from the window, her eyes red but her voice steady. Elena told me once, she said, that the worst part of your disappearance wasn't the practical challenges of raising twins alone. It wasn't the financial stress or the exhaustion. It was that she had lost the person who knew all her stories. She said you were the only one who remembered the hiking disaster and the movie theater incident and 100 other small moments that made up who she was. When you left, those memories became lonely because there was no one to share them with. The observation cut deep, revealing a dimension of his betrayal that Marcus hadn't fully considered. He hadn't just abandoned his wife and children. He had erased himself as the keeper of their shared history, leaving Elena alone with memories that had no witness. I can't give her back those years, Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. I can't undo the loneliness or the struggle, but I can give you girls the stories. I can tell you about your mother when she was young and happy and full of dreams. I can make sure that those memories aren't lost. Emma reached for the box labeled personal, the one they had been avoiding. This is the memory box, she said, the one we told you about. Are we ready to open it? Everyone looked at each other, understanding that whatever was inside would be significant. Mrs. Castellano nodded. I think we're ready, she said. Emma, Lily, do you want to do it together? The twins each placed a hand on the lid of the box and lifted it in unison. Inside was a carefully curated collection of items that told the story of a marriage and its aftermath. There were letters, dozens of them, written in Marcus's handwriting from the early days of their relationship. Love letters full of promises and dreams, and the kind of earnest emotion that only young love could produce. Lily picked up one of the letters and began to read aloud. Dear Elena, this one started, I know we've only been dating for 3 months, but I'm already certain that I want to spend my life with you. You make everything better just by existing in the same world as me. When I'm with you, I believe I can be the man I've always wanted to be. Her voice broke on the last sentence, and she handed the letter to Marcus. He took it, staring at his own handwriting from 15 years ago. The man who had written these words seemed like a stranger, someone who believed in his own goodness, who thought love was enough to overcome any obstacle. I meant every word, Marcus said. At the time, I truly believed I could be that person for her, and for a while I was. Emma found a small velvet box buried beneath the letters. Inside was a simple silver bracelet, tarnished with age. What's this? She asked, holding it up to the light. Marcus's breath caught in his throat. That was the first gift I ever gave your mother. It was our 1-month anniversary, and I was a broke college student, so I couldn't afford anything expensive. I found that bracelet at a thrift store, and I was embarrassed by how cheap it was, but she loved it. She said it was perfect because I had chosen it specifically for her, that it mattered more than any expensive jewelry because it showed I was paying attention to what she liked. The bracelet had a small charm hanging from it, a tiny silver star. Lily examined it closely. Mom used to say that everyone had their own star, she said, that no matter how lost we felt, we could always find our way home by following our star. Was that because of this bracelet? Marcus nodded. She had a whole philosophy about stars and hope and finding your way home. I thought it was beautiful and maybe a little naive, but she believed it so completely that it became true for her. Even in her darkest moments, she held on to that hope. Beneath the bracelet and letters were more items. A pressed flower from their wedding bouquet, dried and fragile. Movie ticket stubs from dates they'd gone on. A menu from the restaurant where Marcus had proposed, with Elena's notes written in the margins. A baby hospital bracelet for each twin, impossibly small. And at the very bottom, wrapped carefully in tissue paper, was a journal. Emma lifted it out with reverent hands. The cover was worn leather, and the pages were filled with Elena's flowing handwriting. This is her diary, Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. Do we have the right to read it? Mrs. Castellano moved closer, looking at the journal with a mixture of curiosity and concern. Your mother was a very private person, she said carefully, but she also kept this journal in a box she clearly intended for you to find. I think she wanted you to read it, but it's your choice. Lily opened to a random page in the middle and began to read silently. Her eyes widened, and she looked up at Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. Dad, she said, using the word deliberately, tentatively, you need to hear this. She cleared her throat and read aloud. The entry is dated 6 years ago, she said, 3 years after you left. It says I saw him today, or at least I think I did. There was an article in a tech magazine about a new software company, and the CEO's photo looked so much like Michael that I couldn't breathe. Different name, different hair color, but those eyes. Those are his eyes. I hired an investigator, and my suspicions were confirmed. My dead husband is alive and thriving in California, building an empire while I struggle to pay rent and raise our daughters alone. I should be angry. I should expose him, ruin everything he's built, but all I feel is relief. He's alive, he's healthy, and maybe, just maybe, he's become the man he always wanted to be. I'm going to let him go, truly let him go, and hope that someday when our daughters are old enough to understand, they'll have the chance to know their father. Not the broken man who ran away, but the man he became after he healed. The room was absolutely silent. Marcus felt as though the ground had opened beneath him. Elena had known for 6 years. She had watched him build his company, seen his success, and chosen to protect him even as she struggled. The grace of that decision, the staggering generosity of it, was almost incomprehensible. Emma was crying openly now, tears streaming down her face as she clutched the journal. "She knew," Emma said. "She knew you were alive and she never told us. She let us think you were dead because she thought it would be easier than knowing you'd chosen to leave." Mrs. Castellano moved to put her arms around both girls. "She did it to protect you," she said gently, "and to protect him." She believed in second chances and redemption, in the possibility that people could change. That belief sustained her through everything. Marcus couldn't speak. He sat with his hands pressed against his face, his body shaking with sobs he had held back for 8 years. Everything he thought he understood about his past was wrong. Elena had given him the greatest gift imaginable, the freedom to heal and become someone better, and she had done it without asking for anything in return. Lily set the journal down and moved to stand in front of him. She waited until he looked up at her, his face wet with tears, and then she said something that changed everything. "Mom forgave you," she said simply. "We watched her die, and in the last days when she could barely speak, she kept saying 2 things. She said to take care of each other, and she said to forgive. We thought she meant we should forgive her for leaving us, but I think she meant something else. She was telling us to forgive you." Emma joined her sister, and together they stood before their father, 2 9-year-old girls offering absolution that no one had the right to expect. "We're not there yet," Emma said, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. "We're not ready to say we forgive you completely. That's going to take time, maybe a lot of time. But we want to try. We want to see if we can build something together, even if it's different from what we lost." Marcus stood and pulled his daughters into his arms, holding them as he should have held them every day for the past 8 years. "I will earn it," he promised, his voice muffled against their hair. "However long it takes, I will show up every single day and earn the right to be your father." They stood like that for a long time, 3 people bound by blood and grief and the fragile beginning of healing, while Mrs. Castellano watched with tears streaming down her face and Elena's memory box open on the table between them. The following Monday arrived with the weight of inevitability. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for 9 o'clock, and Marcus walked into the Chun Technologies building knowing that everything he had built was about to be put on trial. The legal team had worked around the clock to prepare documents addressing the identity fraud, potential liability issues, and the complex process of reconciling Michael Torres with Marcus Chun. Patricia, his lawyer, met him in the lobby with a briefcase full of papers and an expression that suggested the odds were not in his favor. "The board is divided," she said without preamble as they rode the elevator to the executive floor. "About half want you out immediately. They see you as a liability and a fraud. The other half are more sympathetic, but they're worried about shareholder lawsuits and the company's reputation. You're going to need to give the performance of your life in there." Marcus nodded, his mind strangely calm. He had spent the weekend with his daughters, going through Elena's belongings and telling stories and beginning the slow work of building trust. Compared to that, a boardroom full of angry executives seemed almost manageable. "Whatever happens," he said, "I'm not going to lie anymore. If they want the truth, they'll get all of it, even the parts that make me look worse." Patricia gave him a sharp look. "That's noble, but as your lawyer, I need to advise you that radical honesty might cost you everything." He smiled grimly. "I already lost everything once. This time at least I'll lose it while telling the truth." The boardroom was packed when they entered. All 23 board members were present, along with several lawyers and the company's chief ethics officer. Richard Thornton sat at the head of the table, looking like a man who had aged considerably in the past week. He gestured for Marcus to take his usual seat, a courtesy that surprised him given the circumstances. The room fell silent as everyone settled into their chairs, the air thick with tension and anticipation. Richard cleared his throat and began. "We're here to address the revelations made last week regarding Marcus Chun's true identity and the implications for this company." "Marcus, you've submitted extensive documentation to the legal team. Before we discuss that, I'd like to give you the opportunity to explain, in your own words, why we should allow you to continue in any capacity with this organization." Marcus stood, feeling more exposed than he ever had in his life. He looked around the table at faces he had worked with for years, people who had trusted him, invested in his vision, believed in the carefully constructed story he had told. "When I created Marcus Chun," he began, "I was running from the worst version of myself. I was a man who had failed his family, who had let fear and pride destroy everything he loved. I convinced myself that by disappearing, by starting over with a new name and a new identity, I could somehow erase those failures and become someone better." His voice was steady, but his hands gripped the edge of the table. "I built this company with that stolen identity. Every contract we've signed, every innovation we've created, every success we've celebrated has been tainted by that original lie. And I understand that many of you feel betrayed, rightfully so. You thought you knew who I was, and now you're discovering that person was a fiction." Margaret Foster raised her hand, her expression thoughtful rather than angry. "Marcus," she said, "I think we all understand the personal circumstances that led to your decision. But from a business perspective, we need to understand the legal implications. Are we exposed to lawsuits? Could our contracts be invalidated? Could shareholders claim fraud?" Patricia stood and distributed packets to each board member. "We've done a comprehensive legal analysis," she said. "The good news is that Marcus Chun is a legally valid identity. The name change was processed correctly. All documentation was legitimate, and there's no evidence of criminal fraud in the business dealings. The bad news is that the misrepresentation of his personal history could potentially be grounds for shareholder lawsuits or board removal for cause. However, given that his technical and business skills are genuine and the company's success is built on real innovation rather than deception, we believe the legal exposure is manageable. David Park, the venture capitalist who had been most vocally critical, leaned forward. That's all very neat from a legal standpoint, he said, but what about trust? How do we know this won't happen again? How do we know there aren't other secrets waiting to explode? Marcus met his gaze directly. You don't, he said simply. You can't know that. Just like I can't know whether I'll be a good father to my daughters or whether I can rebuild what I destroyed. All I can offer is complete transparency from this point forward. My daughters have taught me something in the past. They've taught me that hiding from your mistakes doesn't make them go away. It just makes them grow bigger in the darkness. He pulled out his phone and brought up a document he had prepared. I've written a complete timeline of my life, both as Michael Torres and Marcus Chun. Every significant event, every decision, every mistake. I'm prepared to release this to the board, to the employees, to the public if necessary. No more secrets. The room erupted in discussion, board members arguing in heated whispers with their neighbors. Richard Thornton called for order, his gavel rapping against the table. Let's address this systematically, he said. First question. Is there anyone here who believes Marcus should be terminated immediately for cause? Show of hands. 7 hands went up, fewer than Marcus had expected, but still a substantial minority. Second question. Is there anyone who believes Marcus should continue as CEO with no consequences? Not a single hand rose. Right, Richard said. So we're looking at some middle ground. The board spent the next hour debating various options. Temporary suspension with pay while an external ethics review was conducted. Demotion to a non-executive role, requiring Marcus to publicly disclose his past. Mandatory counseling and regular ethics audit. Each suggestion was picked apart, analyzed for precedent and practicality. Finally, Margaret Foster proposed a compromise that seemed to capture the room's attention. What if, she suggested, we use the situation as an opportunity rather than just damage control? Marcus's story, difficult as it is ultimately about redemption and second chances. We could restructure his role, keep him involved in the technical and innovation side where his skills are unmatched, but bring in an independent CEO to handle the public-facing leadership. And we could launch an initiative around second chances, perhaps partnering with the Maya's Voice Foundation that he mentioned last week, focusing on rehabilitation and family reunification programs. The suggestion was met with thoughtful silence. It was creative, turning a scandal into a mission, transforming Marcus from a liability into a symbol of the company's values. David Park nodded slowly. I could support that, he said, but I'd want complete financial transparency, third-party audits, regular reports to the board, and a clear understanding that any further deception would result in immediate termination with cause. Other board members began voicing support for the compromise, each adding their own conditions and safeguards. Marcus watched the discussion unfold with a strange sense of detachment. They were deciding his fate, but more importantly, they were engaging with the real situation rather than just the scandal. After another 30 minutes of negotiation, Richard Thornton called for a vote. All in favor of the proposed restructuring, maintaining Marcus in a chief innovation officer role while recruiting an independent CEO, and launching the Second Chances initiative, raise your hand. 18 hands went up. Those opposed? Or 5 hands. The motion passes, Richard said, and Marcus felt his knees go weak with relief. He would lose his title, lose his position as CEO, but he would keep his connection to the company he had built. More importantly, he wouldn't have to hide anymore. As the meeting adjourned and board members filed out, some avoiding his gaze while others offered cautious congratulations, Margaret Foster approached him. You got lucky today, she said bluntly, but luck runs out. The real test will be whether you can follow through on the transparency you promised, whether you can be the person your daughters need you to be while still contributing to this company. I know, Marcus said, and thank you, Margaret. For seeing past the scandal to the possibility. She smiled slightly. I'm a mother too, she said. I understand the power of second chances. Don't waste yours. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus's life transformed in ways both profound and mundane. He moved into a new office, smaller but with better light, and began the process of transitioning his CEO responsibilities to the search committee. He met with his daughters 3 times a week, sometimes at his house where they were slowly adding color and life to the sterile space, sometimes at neutral locations like parks or museums where they could explore together without the weight of too much history. The custody proceedings moved forward with unexpected speed, helped by Mrs. Castellano's support and the social workers' recognition that the girls were thriving with the increased contact with their father. Marcus attended parenting classes, met with family therapists, and did everything the system required to prove he was serious about becoming a real father. Emma and Lily remained cautious, testing his commitment with small challenges. They would cancel plans at the last minute to see if he would get angry. They would ask difficult questions about why he left, asking the same questions in different ways to see if his answers remained consistent. They would have bad days when they were rude or dismissive, pushing to see if he would give up on them. Marcus weathered all of it with patience he didn't know he possessed. He showed up for every scheduled visit, even when they said they didn't want to see him. He answered every difficult question honestly, even when the truth made him look terrible. He sat through through their anger and their grief without defending himself or making excuses. One evening, about 3 weeks after the boardroom confession, Marcus received an unexpected call. It was the principal of Franklin Elementary, asking if he could come in for a meeting the following day. His heart raced, immediately fearing something was wrong with the girls. The principal, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Sarah Williams, assured him that Emma and Lily were fine, but there was something important she needed to discuss with him in person. Marcus arrived at the school the next afternoon, his mind running through worst-case scenarios. Dr. Williams greeted him in her office, a space filled with children's artwork and motivational posters. She gestured for him to sit, and then placed a folder on the desk between them. "Mr. Chun, or should I say Mr. Torres," she began, "I wanted to speak with you about your daughters." Marcus braced himself for criticism or concern. Instead, Dr. Williams smiled warmly. "I've been a principal for 23 years, Doctor," Williams said, "and I've seen just about every family situation imaginable. Divorce, death, abandonment, reunification, you name it. But I've rarely seen two children handle a difficult transition with as much grace and maturity as Emma and Lily are showing." Marcus felt his chest tighten with pride and relief. "They're remarkable," he said. "Much stronger than I deserve, Doctor." Williams opened the folder and pulled out several sheets of paper. "These are essays they wrote for their English class," she explained. "The assignment was to write about a hero in their lives. I wanted you to see what they wrote because I think it will help you understand what they're going through." She handed him the first essay, written in Emma's precise handwriting. Marcus began to read, his eyes blurring with tears before he finished the first paragraph. "My hero is my mom," Emma had written. "She died 3 months ago after fighting cancer for 2 years. She never complained and she never gave up, even when she was so sick she could barely get out of bed. She taught me that being strong doesn't mean pretending nothing hurts. It means facing the pain and choosing to love anyway." The essay continued, describing Elena's determination to provide for her daughters, her sense of humor even in dark times, and the lessons she had imparted about forgiveness and second chances. At the end, Emma had written something that made Marcus's heart stop. "My mom's last gift to me and my sister was showing us that everyone deserves the chance to become better. She forgave someone who hurt her very badly, and because she did, we get to have a relationship with our dad. I'm still figuring out how I feel about him, but I know my mom would want me to try. That makes her my hero." Lily's essay was similar but approached from a different angle. She wrote about the same themes of strength and forgiveness, but focused more on the specific memories she had of Elena in her final days. She described how her mother had held their hands and told them stories about their father, stories designed to help them understand rather than to make them angry. She wrote about the memory box in the journal and the revelation that their mother had known their father was alive. The essay concluded with a line that cut to the heart of everything. "Heroes aren't people who never make mistakes. They're people who love so much they're willing to forgive the unforgivable. My mom was that kind of hero, and she's teaching me to be brave enough to love people even when they've hurt me." Dr. Williams waited quietly while Marcus composed himself. "I'm sharing these with you," she said gently, "because I want you to understand the incredible gift those girls are trying to give. They're processing tremendous grief while simultaneously attempting to build a relationship with a father they've never really known. It's an enormous emotional burden for children their age." Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. The principal continued, her tone becoming more serious. "I also need to tell you that they're struggling more than they let on. Their grades have slipped slightly, not dramatically, but noticeably. They've been getting into small conflicts with other students. Nothing serious, but it's out of character for them. And their teachers report that they seem distracted, like they're carrying weight that's too heavy for their shoulders." "What can I do?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. "How can I help them?" "Oh, Doc." Williams leaned back in her chair, considering her words carefully. "Keep doing what you're doing," she said. "Show up consistently. Be honest with them. Don't try to rush the relationship or force intimacy before they're ready, but also recognize that they need professional support beyond what you can provide. The school counselor has been meeting with them weekly, and I'd recommend continuing that. They also might benefit from a grief support group specifically for children who've lost parents. I can provide some recommendations like." Marcus took the list of resources she offered, committing to follow up on every single one. He left the school feeling both encouraged and overwhelmed. His daughters were trying so hard to accept him, but they were also hurting in ways he couldn't fully reach. The weight of responsibility felt crushing. That evening, he received a text from Emma. "Can we come over tonight, just for a little while? We need to talk to you about something." Marcus's heart jumped. He immediately replied that of course they could come, that he would pick them up right away. Mrs. Castellano dropped the girls off an hour later, giving Marcus a meaningful look that suggested she knew what this visit was about. "Call me when they're ready to come home," she said, "and Michael, be patient." When the girls walked into his house, they moved with a hesitation that hadn't been there in previous visits. They sat together on the sofa, holding hands in that way twins do when they need each other's strength. Marcus sat across from them, giving them space but showing he was present. "What's going on?" he asked gently. "You said you needed to talk." Emma took a deep breath. "We've been thinking a lot about everything," she said, "about Mom and you and what we want our family to look like. and we need to tell you something that's been bothering us. Marcus braced himself, preparing for anger or rejection. Lily jumped in, her voice quiet but steady. We're scared, she said. We're scared that we're betraying Mom by accepting you. Like if we start to love you, it means we didn't love her enough. Like we're replacing her or forgetting her. The confession hung in the air, raw and painful in its honesty. Marcus felt his heart break for these children who were trying to navigate impossible emotional territory. He moved to sit beside them on the sofa. Close, but not touching. Can I tell you something? He asked, and they nodded. Your mother would never, ever want you to choose between loving her and loving me. She was too generous for that, too wise. The fact that she forgave me and left you the information to find me proves that she wanted you to have a father, not to replace her, but to add to the love in your lives. Emma wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But how do we do that? She asked. How do we love someone who hurt us so badly without feeling like we're saying what they did was okay? Marcus thought carefully before responding. Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending the hurt didn't happen, he said. It means deciding that the person is more than their worst mistake. It means choosing to see their full humanity, the good and the bad, and deciding there's enough good to build on. Your mother understood that. She knew I had failed her terribly, but she also remembered the man I had been before fear broke me, and she believed I could become someone better. You don't have to forgive me completely right now or ever, but you can choose to see if we can build something new together while still honoring your mother's memory. Lily leaned against him tentatively, resting her head on his shoulder. It's so hard, she whispered. Everything is so confusing and it hurts all the time. Marcus put his arm around her, then opened his other arm to Emma, who, after a moment's hesitation, leaned in as well. I know, he said, and I wish I could take that pain away. But all I can do is be here for it, to sit with you in the confusion and the hurt and remind you that you're not alone. Emma's voice was muffled against his chest. Doctor, William showed you our essays, didn't she? That's why you're saying all the right things. Marcus smiled despite the tears on his own face. She did show me, he admitted, and they were beautiful and heartbreaking. But I'm not saying what I'm saying because they were the right words. I'm saying them because they're true. You girls are the bravest people I've ever met, and I'm in awe of how you're handling this. They sat like that for a long time, the three of them tangled together on the sofa while the sun set outside the windows and the house grew dark around them. It wasn't a moment of complete healing or perfect resolution. It was simply a moment of being together in the mess, of acknowledging the difficulty without running from it. Eventually, Lily pulled back and looked at Marcus with those amber eyes so like his own. Can we ask you for something? She said. It's kind of a big thing. Anything, Marcus said immediately. What do you need? Emma spoke up, her voice stronger now. We want to do a memorial service for Mom, she said. A real one, not like the funeral where everything was formal and sad. We want to celebrate her life, tell stories about her, laugh about the funny things she did, and we want you there. We want you to tell stories too about when you loved her and she loved you. We want to remember that our parents were happy once, even if it didn't last. Marcus felt the request settle into his chest with the weight of both honor and terror. Being part of Elena's memorial, standing up in front of people who had known her and supported her through his abandonment would be one of the hardest things he had ever done. But his daughters were asking, and he had promised to show up. Of course, he said, I would be honored to be part of that. When were you thinking? At the community center where Mom used to volunteer. We wanted to be somewhere she loved, somewhere that mattered to her. Marcus nodded, already feeling the anxiety of what that day would bring. But alongside the anxiety was something else, something that felt almost like hope. His daughters were inviting him into their grief, into the most sacred space of their love for their mother. They were saying that despite everything, there was room for him in their family story. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus threw himself into preparing for the memorial. He wrote and rewrote his speech a dozen times, trying to find words that would honor Elena without making himself the center of the story. He looked through old photos and videos, gathering memories that would paint a picture of the woman she had been before illness and single parenthood had forced her into a narrower version of herself. The girls came over more frequently during this time, sometimes to help with memorial preparations, other times just to be together. Marcus learned their rhythms, their moods, their preferences. He learned that Emma liked to process emotions through action, cleaning, or organizing when she was upset. Lily preferred to withdraw into herself, reading or drawing in silence until she was ready to talk. He learned that they both had their mother's stubbornness and her fierce loyalty, that they would defend each other against any perceived threat with the ferocity of much older warriors. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, they began to relax around him. The visits became less awkward, the silences more comfortable. They started calling him Dad more naturally without the self-conscious pause that had accompanied it at first. They teased him about his terrible cooking and his obsessively organized closet. They brought friends over to swim in his pool, filling the sterile house with the sound of children's laughter for the first time since he had built it. The night before the memorial, Marcus couldn't sleep. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, running through his speech one more time and wondering if he had the courage to stand in front of Elena's community and admit his failures. His phone buzzed with a text message at 2 in the morning. It was from Emma. Can't sleep either, the message read. Nervous about tomorrow, Marcus replied immediately. Me too. Want to talk? His phone rang a moment later and he answered to find both girls on the line, calling from Mrs. Castellano's house where they were staying for the night. Keep thinking about Mom, Lily said, her voice small and sad, about how she would have loved this memorial. How she would have made sure everyone felt included and comfortable. She was so good at that. Marcus settled back against his pillows, phone pressed to his ear. She was incredible at making people feel seen, Marcus agreed. I remember when we first started dating, she had this way of remembering tiny details about everyone she met. She'd ask the barista about her daughter's soccer game or remember that a coworker was worried about a sick parent. She made everyone feel like they mattered. That's how we want the memorial to be, Emma said. Not sad and formal, but warm and full of the kind of love Mom gave to everyone. Do you think we can pull it off? You already have, Mark. The fact that you're thinking about how to honor her spirit rather than just going through the motions, that's exactly what she would have wanted. They talked for another hour, sharing memories and fears and hopes for the following day. By the time they hung up, Marcus felt calmer, more centered. His daughters had called him in their moment of vulnerability, had reached out across the distance that still existed between them. It was another small bridge being built, another connection being forged. The morning of the memorial dawned clear and bright, the kind of perfect autumn day that Elena had always loved. Marcus dressed carefully in a dark suit, the same one he had worn to her funeral 8 years ago when he had stood in the back, unrecognized and drowning in guilt. This time would be different. This time he would stand at the front beside his daughters and speak the truth about the woman he had loved and failed and never stopped remembering. The community center was already filling with people when he arrived. Teachers from the girls' school, neighbors from Elena's apartment building, co-workers from the various jobs she had held, volunteers from the organizations she had supported. They had all come to remember a woman who had touched their lives with her kindness and strength. Emma and Lily stood near the entrance greeting people as they arrived. They wore matching dresses in soft lavender, Elena's favorite color, and their hair was pulled back in the same style their mother had favored. When they saw Marcus, they both smiled, genuine expressions of welcome that made his heart soar. "You look nice," Emma said, adjusting his tie slightly. "Mom always said you never could get your tie quite straight." The observation, so casual and intimate, felt like acceptance. They were including him in their family mythology, the small details and inside jokes that bound people together. The memorial began with a slideshow of photos set to Elena's favorite music. Marcus watched images of her life scroll past, seeing the beautiful progression from young woman to mother to the luminous soul who had faced death with grace. He saw himself in the early photos, young and hopeful, and then his absence created a void that Elena had somehow filled with her own strength. Mrs. Castellano spoke first, her voice steady as she described her daughter's courage and compassion. Several of Elena's friends shared stories that had the room laughing through tears, remembering her terrible cooking and her infectious optimism and her stubborn refusal to accept help even when she desperately needed it. Then it was time for Marcus to speak. He walked to the front of the room, feeling hundreds of eyes on him. Many of these people knew who he was, knew what he had done. He could feel their judgment like a physical weight, but he also felt his daughter's presence in the front row, their amber eyes watching him with cautious hope. He unfolded the paper where he had written his speech, but then he folded it again and set it aside. These words needed to come from his heart, not from carefully crafted sentences. "My name is Michael Torres," he began, his voice clear and steady. "Most of you know me as Marcus Chun, the man who abandoned Elena and our daughters 8 years ago. I'm not going to stand here and make excuses or ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want to tell you about the woman Elena was before I broke her heart, because she deserves to be remembered as more than just the strong single mother who survived my betrayal." He looked directly at Emma and Lily, drawing strength from their presence. "Elena was joy," he said. Pure, uncomplicated joy. She laughed at terrible jokes and danced in the kitchen while cooking dinner and believed that every person had goodness inside them if you looked hard enough. She saw the world not as it was, but as it could be, and she had this remarkable ability to make you believe in that vision too. He told the story of the hiking disaster, the movie theater incident, and a dozen other small moments that revealed Elena's character. He spoke about how she had held his hand during difficult times, how she had believed in him even when he didn't believe in himself, and how her faith in human redemption had been absolute and unshakable. And then he spoke about the journal, about her decision to protect him even after discovering he was alive, about the grace she had shown in giving their daughters the choice to find him when they were ready. "I will spend the rest of my life trying to become the man Elena believed I could be," he concluded, his voice breaking with emotion. "I can't undo the pain I caused or the years I stole from our family, but I can honor her memory by being the father she wanted our daughters to have. I can show up, even when it's hard, even when I'm scared, even when I don't know what I'm doing, because that's what Elena did every single day. She showed up for everyone she loved, no matter the cost to herself." The room was silent when he finished, but it wasn't the hostile silence he had feared. It was the silence of people processing profound emotion, of a community beginning to understand a complicated story. Then Mrs. Castellano began to clap, slow and deliberate, and others joined in until the entire room was applauding. Not for him, he realized, but for Elena, for the kind of love that could forgive the unforgivable and believe in redemption even from beyond the grave. Emma and Lily came to the front then and read a joint statement they had prepared. They spoke about their mother's lessons, her laughter, her strength, and her final wishes for them to choose love over anger and hope over despair. They thanked everyone for coming and for being part of their mother's village, the community that had supported her when she needed it most. As the memorial concluded and people moved into the adjoining room for refreshments, several of Elena's friends approached Marcus. Their conversations were cautious but not hostile. They asked about about his daughters, about his plans, about whether he was truly committed to being present in their lives. He answered every question honestly, not defending himself but not hiding either. One woman, a teacher who had worked with Elena at the elementary school, pulled him aside. "Elena talked about you sometimes," she said quietly. "Not often and never with bitterness. She said you were sick in a way that people don't often recognize, that shame and fear had poisoned you. She hoped you had found healing." Marcus felt tears sting his eyes. "Did she really say that?" he asked. The woman nodded. "She loved you even after everything. Not the way you love a partner, but the way you love someone you've shared a life with. She wanted you to be okay wherever you were." 3 months after the memorial, the custody hearing finally arrived. Marcus sat in the courtroom with his lawyer while Emma and Lily waited outside with Mrs. Castellano. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, reviewed the extensive documentation that had been prepared. Character references from Marcus's therapist. Reports from the social workers who had monitored his visits with the girls. Statements from the school about the positive changes they had observed in Emma and Lily, and Marcus's own complete disclosure of his past and his commitment to the future. The judge looked at him over her reading glasses. "Mr. Torres," she said, using his legal name, "this is one of the most unusual cases I've encountered. You abandoned your children, faked your death, and lived under a false identity for 8 years. Under normal circumstances, I would deny custody without hesitation, but these are not normal circumstances." She set down her papers and leaned forward. "Your daughters have been clear and consistent in their desire to live with you. Their grandmother supports this decision. The professionals involved in this case all report that you have done extensive work to address your past behavior and prepare for parenthood. And most significantly, you have shown up consistently for 3 months. Even when it was difficult, even when your daughters tested you. That kind of commitment, while it doesn't erase your past failures, suggests genuine change." She paused and Marcus held his breath. "I'm granting joint custody with you as primary guardian and Mrs. Castellano maintaining significant visitation rights and decision-making authority. This arrangement will be reviewed in 6 months. And if there are any concerning developments, it can be modified or revoked. Do you understand the gravity of this responsibility?" Marcus stood, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I understand, Your Honor, and I promise my daughters that I will not waste this chance." 6 months later, Marcus stood in his kitchen, no longer sterile and minimalist, but cluttered with life. Emma's science fair project took up half the counter. Lily's artwork covered the refrigerator. Backpacks and shoes were scattered near the door. The house had been transformed from a museum into a home, filled with noise and mess, and the beautiful chaos of family life. He was cooking dinner, attempting to follow one of Elena's old recipes that the girls had found in her belongings. He was failing spectacularly, the pasta overcooked and the sauce somehow both watery and burnt. But Emma and Lily were laughing as they tried to help him salvage it. "This is terrible," Emma announced, tasting the sauce and making an exaggerated face of disgust. "Mom would be so proud that you inherited her cooking skills." Marcus laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded. "Your grandmother's bringing pizza in 20 minutes, he admitted. "I knew this was going to be a disaster, but I wanted to try." "That's all we can ask," Lily said, and the wisdom in her young voice reminded him so much of Elena that his heart ached. "That you keep trying, even when you fail." Later that evening, after Mrs. Castellano had indeed arrived with pizza and they had eaten together around the dining table that now bore the marks of family meals, Emma asked if they could video call some of the board members from Chun Technologies. Marcus had continued working as Chief Innovation Officer, and the girls had become curious about his work. They wanted to show off a prototype they had built for a school project, a solar-powered charging station they thought could help students in areas without reliable electricity. The video call connected, and Richard Thornton's face appeared on the screen along with several other board members. The girls presented their project with confidence, explaining the technical specifications and their vision for how it could be manufactured affordably. Marcus watched with pride as his daughters demonstrated the same innovative thinking and social consciousness that had driven his own work. When they finished, Margaret Foster leaned into her camera with a smile. "Those are remarkable minds you have there, Marcus," she said. "I see a lot of their father in them." Emma and Lily exchanged glances, then Emma spoke up. "Actually," she said, holding up her hands and comparing them to Marcus's hands that rested on the table beside her, "these are our dad's hands." She gestured to the scar between his thumb and forefinger, then to the identical scars on both her hand and Lily. "We all have the same mark. Mom said it meant we were connected, that no matter what happened, we belonged to each other." The board members on the screen smiled, and Marcus felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. This was his redemption, not in grand gestures or public apologies, but in quiet moments of connection with his daughters, in homework help and failed cooking attempts and shared laughter, in showing up day after day, building trust one moment at a time. He had lost 8 years with them, years he could never reclaim, but he had been given the gift of their future, and he would spend every remaining day earning the right to be called their father. As the video call ended and the girls headed upstairs to finish their homework, Mrs. Castellano touched Marcus's shoulder. "Elena would be proud," she said softly. "Not because you're perfect, but because you're trying." That's all she ever wanted. Marcus looked around his cluttered, chaotic, beautiful home and realized that he had finally found what he had been running from all those years ago. He had found himself, flawed and broken but healing, surrounded by the love he had never deserved but had been given anyway. And in that moment, standing in his kitchen with the sound of his daughters' voices drifting down from upstairs, he was finally, truly home.